We now welcome Alex Kirshner onto the YouTube channel. We're excited to have him join us. He's a member of Split Zone Duo. Alex, thanks for taking the time.
Bennett, it's great to see you virtually. A pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're excited. So I think for starters, if our listeners don't know about Split Zone Duo, they're missing out. But can you explain what Split Zone Duo is, how long you've been doing it, and how people can find that work that you guys do?
Yeah, we're a national college football podcast, independently run, led by Richard Johnson and me, oftentimes with our co-founder Stephen Godfrey joining as well. We have a lot of fun. We try to be a college football podcast that covers the entire sport, meaning not just focusing on the blue bloods, the biggest teams, the playoff race, but to really dig into whatever we think is interesting. We have no investors. We are subscriber supported for the vast majority of the money that we make. And you can find our podcasts wherever you find podcasts.
Yeah, you guys do a great job of talking about the national landscape and everyone in the national landscape. They're on a ton of podcasts. I don't think they cover the national game. Will also do like an hour long episode on why ULM is bad. That
Yeah,
is
you
unique
got to
to you
do it.
guys.
You got to do it. Yeah. And I understand we're going to talk some Sun Belt today. So that's personally probably my favorite league to talk about. I think it's at least the most geographically sensible league left in college sports, which is the thing that I appreciate.
I
And I'm
think
sure a
Jamie,
lot of your viewers do too.
yeah, Jamie fans love that too. And right before we get into it, I know you guys have a live podcast coming up in Raleigh. Can you tell us more about that and how people can attend if they would like to?
Yeah, this Saturday, August 23rd, we're going to be at the Rialto in Raleigh, North Carolina. Show starts, I believe, at 7 o'clock with doors at 6. You can get tickets at therialto.com, the Rialto, Rialto. It's going to be us, Big Screen Sports, Ovius and Gilio. Going to be a great crowd on hand, we expect. So we would absolutely love to see you. Go to therialto.com. And if you want 25% off your ticket, you can use you can use SZD as your promo code at checkout.
Awesome. All right, let's dive into the Sun Belt. We were listening to your preview, and you and Richard had some glowing reviews about JMU, which I know fans were excited about in the Sun Belt podcast preview. I think you made a comment in there that in the trenches they're Boise-esque, which I know
Yeah.
had me excited, some fans excited. I was curious if you could explain what you like about JMU in the trenches. I know Holy Cross transfer Patrick McMurtry sort of headlines the offensive line, but what do you like about the Dukes in the interior?
Yeah, I think that it is hard nowadays for group of five teams to retain obvious all conference type talent that everyone else in the sport knows is good because there's just typically going to be somebody coming across with a bigger bag at some point in one of the transfer portal windows to get your best players. I mean, this is the battle that most G5 teams face. And one way in which I think James Madison is pretty Boise-like is that the Dukes have been able, not to say they have never been picked over at all, but to avoid sort of the worst of that. And much like last year, Boise State had a player in Ashton Genty coming in, as well as their quarterback, Maddox Madsen, a wide receiver, Cam Camper, handful of other players. But they had guys who were proven, who had demonstrated that they could play for any team in the country, and they hung on to them. And James Madison, I think, has done a nice job of doing something pretty similar. We talked about McMurtry just there, really good all conference offensive lineman. They've done it with George Petway. It obviously helps when you have players, I believe, like Petway, who have been elsewhere before
Yeah.
and maybe don't want to, make a 3 or 4 stop college career. But, the way that James Madison has built continuity and been able to keep a lot of their good players. Certainly not all of them. I know Rutgers, for instance, went on a little bit of a shopping spree through the roster over the last year, but a lot of the good players. And, it makes you believe in the culture that they're building, the roster that they're building.
For sure. I was also interested in your perspective on the quarterback room, which is certainly an interesting one. You've got Alonzo Barnett returning from an ACL injury. They're being kind of coy about whether he's
Yeah.
going to play or not. They switched him out of the red jersey to the black jersey. They said because he didn't like the red jersey, which doesn't make a ton of sense. But Matthew Sluka also comes in from UNLV and Holy Cross, where he had the Chesney connection. They have another transfer, Camden Coleman from Richmond. Three decent quarterbacks, it seems. What do you sort of make of that room and how it might play out?
I'm as curious as you are. With Barnett, you have a guy who can play not just at this level, but at that school. With Sluka, you have a guy who has been able to grasp the Bob Chesney offense in a very good FCS league and be competitive with him at Holy Cross. And with Coleman, you have a player who had the keys to what's been typically a top 25-ish FCS program is again going into the preseason this year. So without having actually been on the ground at practice or having inside insight into the injury situation for Barnett, I sort of do just throw up my hands and say I don't know. But I will watch with a lot of curiosity to see not just who starts week one, but to what extent two or three quarterbacks actually wind up getting snaps for JMU this year.
Yeah, I think fans are excited about that room. I was curious across the rest of the G5, who are some of the top quarterbacks and other teams in the G5 that you think stand out and maybe have the potential to sort of lead their team to the playoff or at least close to it.
I think I'm interested in Memphis this year. I've been a bit of a skeptic in general of the job that Ryan Silverfield has done at Memphis, mainly because they've never figured out how to play even passable defense. But I do like the quarterback that they brought in this year, Brendan Lewis from Nevada, who can throw the ball a bit and just adds a running dimension that they really have not had the last handful of years when their quarterback has been Seth Hennigan, who's been solid but just isn't a runner. Obviously, obviously, Boise State is still going to be right there. I think they're going to have another one at running back with Ashton Genty. I'm not a huge Maddox Madsen guy at quarterback. I watched him throw three picks to Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl, and I think if you're in Boise State's position, you want to be judged among playoff contenders, and I'm just not sure he's the kind of guy who's going to elevate them, but I think they could get back to the playoff. I'm also interested in what happens at Tulane. Tulane has for reasons that you'd rather not have, sort of an interesting quarterback battle. They have Jake Retzlaff, who left BYU amid a finding of an honor code violation after he'd been accused of sexual misconduct. There was a case that was later withdrawn in court connected to that matter. And you have Caden Samanza at Tulane as well, who was the max freshman of the year quarterback not long ago, just last season at Ball State. So that's one of the more sort of compelling quarterback situations. My guess is that John Summerall doesn't bring in Jake Retzlaff if he's not hoping to play him at quarterback for Tulane, but they have options there. And I think that outside of James Madison, those are probably the three teams, Boise, Tulane, and Memphis, that I'm looking at most closely right now for the Group of Fives playoff spot.
Sure. In the Sun Belt, it seems like most of the buzz is JMU heavy, but who else are the teams that you feel like could be contenders? I know there's a lot of roster turnover across the entire G5, which makes it maybe a little
Yeah.
tough to project sometimes.
It does. There is a ton of roster turnover in the Sun Belt in particular. I have a hard time latching on to anybody right now. I like Texas State probably the next most of anybody in the Sun Belt, in part because, as we talk about, like so many of the best players in this league just aren't here anymore, either because they went pro or, Troy's best player, Devontae Ross, a wide receiver, goes to Penn State, or Ahmad Hardy at ULM, which ULM looked like it was making real progress in the first half of
Yeah.
last year. And then they basically lose out and they lose their best player in the portal to go and be the running back for Missouri. I like that Texas State has hung on to some people. They've hung on to Khalil Alexander, who's one of the best pass rushers in the group of five. They've got a wide receiver, Tyron Smith, who was a 1,000-yard man several years ago now at UTEP, and he had injury problems when he portaled to a couple places. Cincinnati, he got a quick cup of coffee at Texas A&M. But now you put him with GJ Kinney in what's typically been a pretty explosive Texas State offense. So I think you could talk me into the Bobcats being pretty good in their last year before they head west, so to speak, to the new Pac-12.
When you're projecting a conference or you're previewing a conference, when you have a program like App State or Marshall, they obviously have a lot of tradition, but they had insane roster turnover, coaching turnover. What do you make of those? Do you give sort of, I guess, a benefit of the doubt to programs that have had success? Is it one that you don't really care anymore about that kind of thing, just because there is so much turnover? What do you make of those teams? I know Jamie fans are interested to see if those two sort of semi-rivals are going to be
Yeah.
up this year.
I find that brand power is not worth that much year to year in the group of five if the roster has just been flipped over. I mean, Southern Miss should know this from the last handful of years under Will Hall, but I am very interested to see what happens now that Charles Huff has basically brought a huge collection, I think like 15 or 20 players from the Marshall Sun Belt Championship team with him to Hattiesburg. Like they've brought some guys over there, not just the quarterback Braylon Braxton, who is definitely going to be one of the better players in this conference. But like Josh Moten is a cornerback for Southern Miss now. He had been at Marshall, who, if you go back and watch Marshall playing Ohio State last year, you'll find a video of him going stride for stride with Jeremiah Smith and intercepting a Will Howard deep ball where he just beats the best receiver in the country very cleanly. I do think Southern Miss is at least going to be better, which is not hard to do when you just went, God, was it 1-11, 2-10, whatever it was. It might have been two and
Yeah.
ten. It was terrible. So bad that I forget what it was in the end. And with App, I don't think it's going to be this year. I think they had some pretty significant portal losses, and not just their quarterback, Joey Aguilar, who's going to be the guy at Tennessee now, but also some guys in the defensive front who I think they're really going to miss. But I am long term pretty optimistic about how that will go. I'm interested to see how Dow Loggins, the new head coach there, will do. Visited with him a few months ago when I was in Boone. And this is a guy who's been all around the SEC. He's been around the NFL in various jobs. He's never been a head coach before, but he's coming off doing some pretty good work at South Carolina, where he was the coordinator for Lenora Sellers in his development from a guy that you've never heard of to a possible Heisman finalist type player this year. And you combine that with pretty good fans, great fan support, not pretty good fan support, great fan support at App State, and what has been from coach to coach a pretty durable culture there. And I think App sooner or later should find its way back towards the top of the Sun Belt.
Yeah, they're an interesting one to watch. JMU's non-conference schedule also has fans pretty stoked. They've got Liberty in there, which I know they're excited about, and then Washington State comes to Bridgeport in November, which is kind of a unique one. What can you say about those two teams? Liberty, I think there's an expectation among the JMU fan base that the Dukes are better, and there's some, I guess, mocking of Conference USA from the fan base and things like that. Is this
Yeah.
Liberty team going to be better than last year's? Is it gonna be more like the 2023 team? What do you make of the Flames?
Good question. I suspect they'll be better than last year in that I don't think this is the kind of team that's going to lose to a Kennesaw State
Sure.
caliber opponent. Again, I mean, last year's Liberty team was really disappointing, but I'm not optimistic about Liberty as a top of the G5 type of team this year. This quarterback situation just isn't that exciting to me. It looks like it's going to be Ethan Vasco unless something's changed in the late hours of the offseason here. He has some experience with Jamie Chadwell, having been with him at Coastal Carolina a couple years ago. But, if you look at the kind of quarterbacks that Liberty has so often had over the past like 5, 6 years, there's kind of a top tier where like Malik Willis, Caden Salter, Liberty's had real playmaking dual threat quarterbacks who can make a lot of things happen, both arm and legs. And I just haven't seen, particularly throwing the ball down the field, that kind of upside from Vasco in his couple years for Coastal Carolina. Maybe Jamie Chadwell can conjure something up. He's obviously a very well-regarded offensive mind, and he's done great work with quarterbacks at several points in his career, most notably during that great run that Coastal Carolina had a couple years back with Chadwell and Grayson McCall. But oftentimes you go into a year with Liberty thinking that's a great quarterback, and I don't really go into it thinking that this year. I think Wazoo coming to Harrisonburg, that will be interesting. I don't know exactly what to make of Washington State because there's just been so much turnover. They kind of got what Oregon State got last year, where the Pac-12 realigned and then the coach leaves and the entire team leaves. I think the reason for immediate optimism is that Jimmy Rogers, the new coach of one of the two best programs in FCS, South Dakota State, brings with him a whole crew of players who were part of that national championship, national finalist nucleus with him for the Jackrabbits. And those guys can definitely play at the G5 level and probably do it really well. I think a lot of them could play at the power conference level if push really came to shove. And so that will be one of the more interesting games of the week when it's played, when Wazoo comes to play James Madison.
Yeah, quite the coaching turnover there and some good coaches. Chesney's gotten a lot of love from JMU fans. I think through the first year, did a decent job with the roster turnover, got him to the 9 wins, first bowl win, all that stuff. Nationally, is he sort of viewed as an up and comer who's who's probably got his eye on a P4 soon? I think that's what fans expect. Does that sound accurate?
It does. Yeah. I mean, I think you look at the track record that James Madison has had the last, it's probably more than 10 years now, but of being the cream of the crop, non-North Dakota State variety in FCS. And, you send a guy like Mike Houston up to FBS, where obviously it didn't work out very well, but you do it. You see the success that Kurt Signetti has had, which is impossible to miss at Indiana. And you see what was a really strong first year for Chesney. I mean, I know that game day wasn't in town and they weren't flirting with an undefeated season, but the roster building, the competency from day one. I think if you asked most people in the national media just to put two and two together, you would think that Chesney would be on some people's radars for power conference jobs sometime in the next few years. I mean, who knows? There could be several of them open in the Virginia area in the ACC in the next, couple of months if things go a certain way.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that too. I know JMU fans love to sort of dub themselves. They did Kings of the East when they won the Sun Belt or won the Sun Belt East their first 2 years of the transition, where of course they weren't eligible to play for the Sun Belt championship game, so they sort of just crowned themselves a division champ. There's a lot of Kings of the Commonwealth stuff. They had the 1 point win over Virginia in 2023. How do Virginia and Virginia Tech look this year? Is there a legitimate case that JMU could be the best team in the state this year?
I think there's a very legitimate case that James Madison could be the best team in Virginia this year. I don't know that that will be true, but I'd feel pretty good that they're going to be better than UVA. And seems reasonable to me that they could be better than Virginia Tech too, though I'm less confident about that. I think that both Virginia Tech and UVA are kind of in put up or shut up moments. Not that they've talked that much. Not, maybe put up or shut up isn't the term, but I think both Tony Elliott and Brent Pry are in spots where they've had some time. They've had 3-ish years to get this thing kind of moving in a better direction than they have. I think in Elliott's case, particularly going into, I believe it was the year before last, you wanted to really give them patience because of just that awful, awful murder of, I believe, 3 players on the team. And like, they had a really terrifying injury to one of their players in
Yeah.
season on, I think, a Thursday night game later that season. Like, you just kind of want to calm down with UVA and just, hope that you're building your culture and things are kind of staying stable. But at some point in these jobs, you have to show forward progress or you're going to get fired. And UVA has done that only to a very slight extent. And Virginia Tech really hasn't done it, despite how bad things were under Justin Fuente when he got fired. I mean, Brent Pry really, I think, in his 3 years there, has one thing to point to, which is the back half of the 2023 season when Kyron Drones looked like he was a future star and things looked like like they were moving in a direction where maybe that would be an ACC championship game contender in 2024, but it didn't happen. They had another 500-ish season, and I think Virginia Tech's recruiting is not in a place where you'd be particularly excited about it. Only maybe I think at last check it was like 2 or 3 of the top 16 players in the state for 2026 were committed to the Hokies. That's not entirely on the head coach. We all know how recruiting works right now, but it would probably be good for Brent Pry to show some momentum, show some progress, some proof of concept this year.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was curious too, and you probably have a better perspective than me from the national landscape, but Virginia and Virginia Tech haven't done a ton of poaching from JMU. You mentioned the Rutgers transfers, or Rutgers came in and stole a couple defensive linemen. Obviously, the Indiana exodus that JMU fans are
Yeah,
familiar with. Is
yeah.
it common that sort of the top team in a state um, looks kind of everywhere? Or I guess, is there a reason why maybe Virginia Tech hasn't stolen a bunch of Dukes over the last couple of years?
It's a great question. I think it's unusual to have a situation where the balance of power is the way that it is in Virginia. Like
Mhm.
I remember looking into this a couple of years ago. Virginia is sort of geared, I think, to be a state that has good group of five programs and challenged power conference programs. And obviously that doesn't mean the lines are going to converge. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that Old Dominion is actually going to be a better program than Virginia Tech, even if they've beaten them a few times in Norfolk. But what I'm talking about is that for like the high 3-star, 4-star types of guys that the Hokies and the Who's would want, Virginia is so close to so many different places with blue blood or blue blood-ish FBS teams, power conference teams, that they're just going to come and pick it over. I mean, like Penn State
Yeah.
has done so much work in the state of Virginia under James Franklin, so much of it. And they've obviously done the same in Maryland and the DC area, the whole DMV, really, but down into the Tidewater and into other parts of Virginia. Clemson has been so active in this part of the country. But when you get down to, a good G5 type of player, like your your two stars, your barely looked at, low ranked three stars who might be like an 81 on the 24/7 sports composite. And so they don't attract a ton of interest from the Penn States of the world. Those are not players that are going to completely change the fortunes of like UVA or Virginia Tech, but there are so many aspiring great G5 programs, not just in Virginia, but in North Carolina too, that really can benefit from players like that. And also you can get them on the bounce back if if a player like that does go to UVA or Tech or somewhere else and then wants to transfer and go, drop down a level and maybe get a little bit closer to home. And so I really think that Virginia, unlike most states, and in part this is because neither Tech nor UVA is really a heavyweight, especially at this point. Tech might have been 20 years ago. I just think it's a hard state to be a middle class ACC program, but it's a really friendly state to be the best team in Conference USA or the best team in the Sun Belt, which so happens to be the case for two of the teams in the state right now.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer. It is fun to look at the recruiting rankings and you see the top guys in Virginia and they're pretty much all going to Penn State most years, it seems like,
Yeah.
outside of UVA and Virginia Tech. The other question I had here to wrap up is JMU fans have I would say a fair bit of delusion. They barely beat Gardner-Webb last year, but then they followed up with a win over North Carolina, and the Gardner-Webb win was quickly forgotten. There was talk about playoff and Lonzo Barnett for Heisman, all that good stuff. So if JMU does make the playoff, the fans are absolutely going to talk themselves into a win in the playoff. We talked about Madsen's 3 interceptions against Penn State, but what would it take in this playoff format for any group of 5 team to actually win a game?
It would take a lot. It
Yeah,
would take a lot. I think it will happen. I mean, we've seen group of five teams win New Year's bowls in the 14 playoff era and in the BCS era as well. Uh, so I'm sure it will happen, but you saw it last year with Boise State. Boise State had maybe the best player in college football with Ashton Genty. But unless you also have a line difference and
yeah,
you have a trench difference on both sides of the ball, I mean, Genty ran his tail off in that game, but it didn't get him much. And, you know, Boise State has one of the best safeties in the group of five, Ty Benfield, who played really well, but Tyler Warren just was all over him and beat him a bunch of times for important plays in that game. You just have to be better at so many positions against a team that definitely has a much bigger budget and definitely has more talented players. So it will happen at some point. There will be a group of five team that will take the 11 seed or the 12 seed and will win a first round game against a five or a six. I definitely think that will happen. And maybe there'll be a case like Boise last year where the Big 12 or the ACC champ is lower ranked and you get a chance to play a lower seeded team in your first playoff game. That's possible. Wouldn't rule that out because I think they're going to do away with the bye that Boise
yeah,
got last year.
yeah.
So maybe that happens, right? Like maybe you get a chance to play a team that's a little bit of a better matchup, but I think it's going to be pretty hard.
Yeah, it seems like it will be. I'm excited though for if JMU can hang with Louisville and get by Liberty for the
Yeah.
delusions that I love
Oh
and get
yeah. No,
excited
that's
about, right?
Louisville's gonna be a great game. I'm
That should be a great one.
very
Friday
bullish on
night.
Louisville
Yeah.
this year. Yeah, that'll be a good one for sure.
Yeah, I guess to sneak in a quick Louisville question, what do you like about them? It seems like offensively they have some of the best running backs and receivers you could want, and then obviously a transfer quarterback who's pretty darn good too.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about the entire roster. I think
Yeah.
the defense is heavily portable, but I think might be pretty good.
Hmm.
And you mentioned it, but I do love those running backs, Isaac Brown and Duke Watson, one of the best tandems that there is anywhere in the backfield. I mean, it's probably not Penn State or Notre Dame level, but it's really good.
Pretty good, yeah.
And I don't think the world of Miller Moss, the quarterback that they
Mhm.
got from USC. I mean, he was benched there for a reason down the stretch, but this is a team that's been able to move the ball with all kinds of quarterbacks who have found second homes over the past handful of years. Jeff Brom is still one of the sharp play callers, quarterback guys in the game. And so I think Louisville will be good. I will definitely make time on a Friday night to watch Louisville against JMU.
Awesome. I think that's all I got. I appreciate the time a lot. Great to hear from you. And I guess one last plug, if people are in North Carolina or in the general area, how can
Yeah.
they again see that live podcast?
Yeah, we would love to see you in Raleigh August 23rd. It's this Saturday. Show's in the evening. I think doors at 6, show around 7. We'll be on a little bit later in the night. Split Zone Duo. It's at the Rialto. You can go to therialto.com. Use the code SZD. That's SZD as in Split Zone Duo for 25% off your tickets. I would love to meet you. Love to chat with you after and have you out at the program. Be awesome.
Awesome.